that as we head back down to our feature match area to catch the recorded draft of Andrew Baeckstrom in our feature match area as these players finish up their deck building before we get into the finals here at Grand Prix Providence. So Andrew Baeckstrom, he's also in Seat A, so he will ultimately be playing against Owen Turtenwald. We know that Turtenwald ultimately ended up in kind of a blue-black, maybe splashing a little bit of red deck. Let's see what things are going on the other side of the draft table for his opponent. Immediately bringing Tillanali's Knight to the front. That kind of interesting because it's just cheap threat, but there's a pretty powerful rare in this mix also, which we might get to. Unfriendly Fire being moved to the front also.
Yeah, Andrew has a lot of good options here. The thing is, if he takes a red card, he's passing quite a few red cards down the road, whereas taking Sanctum Seeker, he's only passing like a Skullduggery, which a good combat trick, of course, but not on the same power level as any of the other red cards in here.
I guess that the tricky thing with taking something like Sanctum Seeker is it may just end up not getting the same amount of support that you can get things going. He does take it. I mean, I guess it's not something you really want to be passing to anybody. Now he has a clear first look at what he might want to try and achieve in this draft. He has a strong incentive to take more vampires, but equally, I mean, if we're talking about team draft dynamics, he has passed some very powerful cards to the other team to get a look at, and immediately shuffling vampires to the front makes perfect sense where he can.
Really good pickup here. If he wants to take the Ixalan's Binding, not only is just a really solid removal spell, it fits nicely with the Sanctum Seeker, as vampires are generally black and white, although we see some other nice ones also pulled up to the front.
Yeah, so two different ways of dealing with a creature, Pious Interdiction and Ixalan's Binding, and then if you just want a creature, Deathless Ancient is a premium flyer. Costs a little bit of mana to get going. 6 mana, quite a bit in this format, but it's a 4/4 flyer that just keeps on coming back, and so many incentives now for Andrew Baeckstrom to go super wide with those vampires.
Yeah, it looks like he's just trying to cut off black as hard as he can. I think Deathless Agent, one of the better flyers in the format, of course. 6 mana, a little more expensive than some of the other ones like Air Elemental you see, but the opportunity to bring it back is really nice.
Bellowing Aegisaur, Looming Altasaur. There's various saws going on, but in terms of the lower end of the curve, not so many great options. This might be a place where Andrew Baeckstrom needs to have a little think about what he wants to be doing, because picking up more high drops when there are low-cost things in the packs could be a dangerous path to go down. Brings a Water Trap Weaver to the front. Kind of like this Merfolk, it does things even if you're not a dedicated Merfolk deck. And I guess that's one of the things about team draft formats. You want to make sure that all of your cards have an impact.
Yeah, sure. The nice thing is all of the creatures Andrew's taken so far are fine standalone on their own. They don't have to be in the tribal deck.
One with the wind being pulled to the front here, as much as anything so that Andrew Baeckstrom can keep it in mind, even if he ultimately does end up passing it. There's a couple of vampires in these packs. Queen's Bay Soldier is just a very solid 2-mana, 2/2, with that creature-type vampire that we know is going to be relevant for the first 2 picks that Baeckstrom's made in this draft. And he picks it up here. It's really interesting to me that there are formats where this would be a sign of just the worst draft imaginable if you were picking a vanilla 2/2 on your 4th pick of the draft. As things stand, though, he knows that he wants to get these tribal synergies going. He knows that he wants to have low drops so he doesn't just get run over in the early game, and actually kind of working out fine. A couple of vampires. You could get a Queen's Bay Soldier, but much happier with a Skymarch Bloodletter. That one, the evasion on it, and the 1 point of life drain, enough to keep it at the top of his pile. And one of the cool things going on here for Baeckstrom, this is the last pack that he's going to see before he sees his pack back. He's more or less monocolor, and the strength of that means that he's able to be very flexible later on in this draft.
Yeah, again, every single card he's taken doesn't necessarily have to be in a tribal thing. They're pretty decent standalone, although he is leaning towards that vampire deck. As you can see, he took that 4th pick Queen's Bay Soldier when there might have been better cards in the pack, but he's trying to cut off the black as hard as he can, and he already has a lot of payoffs for vampire, the Sanctum Seeker and the Deathless Ancient.
So we've got a Ruthless Knave here. One of the interesting things about Ruthless Knave is its ability to generate treasure means that if there are weird splashes going on for Baeckstrom, then he's going to be able to get them going. If the Vampires deck is generating lots of creatures, he can potentially sacrifice them to make things happen. He's also reinforcing this idea of cutting black hard.
Yeah, Ruthless Knave doesn't have any synergies with the vampires per se, but you know what? Vampires, normally black-white, known to produce a lot of tokens. In fact, we see that Queen's Commission pulled up to the front here. A lot of tokens is quite nice with the Ruthless Knave. You can sack the tokens, create a few treasures, of course, and then later on draw some extra cards.
I'm loving how this draft's going for Andrew Baeckstrom. This is his first white card of the draft. Not necessarily committing, but it works so well with everything that he's got going on that if he does end up in black-white, he's certainly not going to mind too much, I wouldn't imagine.
Yeah, he is passing something like a River Herald's Boon here, but I think he's just going solid on his strategy. Again, taking that Queen's Commission, 2 1/1 lifelinkers.
And one of the hallmark black vampire commons still in the pack there, Anointed Deacon.
Very nice.
3/3 for 5. Works so well if you have the 1/1 lifelink vampires that show up all over the place. Right now, I like a lot of what's going on with black, not seeing very much in the way of white at all. Also, I guess one of the potential problems that we may see Andrew Baeckstrom facing, his overall curve definitely on the high side.
Absolutely. But you know what? I think the power of the cards he's taken kind of is, pushes that over the top. It's okay if he's going to be a little bit slower, if he can just resolve those larger threats. And, a lot of these creatures are going to gain him some life to buy that time anyways.
Well, Vicious Conquistador, it's a 1-drop that attacks as a 2/2, sort of. And just having low curve threats, I mean, it's not something that's necessarily going to be top of his list of cards that he's excited about playing, but it all adds up. And you know what? It also reinforces this signal that's going to his left that stay out of black. There's nothing to see here. Sadly, he is getting the signal sort of the other way around of stay out of white, which is a little problematic. Just takes a root-bound crag, which means that someone's mana is going to be a little bit more fiddly. I kind of like that late on in the day. Ancient Bronzedon or a Prying Blade or a Siren's Ruse here. All of them cards that have a role to play. Takes the big dino because he doesn't really want to have his team worry about that one. Dive down versus a Field of Ruin. Field of Ruin, not got too many interesting targets, but I guess that if your opponent is splashing, it gets kind of interesting, and he's not casting a dive down anytime soon. So takes the land there and gets actually a nice one in a land as his very last pick that might help him if he needs to fix his mana later.
Yeah, I think this was a really great start for Andrew. He didn't really hate draft anything, but he just cut off the black cards, specifically the vampires, very, very hard. He started things off with a Sanctum Seeker, picked up that Deathless Ancient, pick 2. Water Trap Weaver was a standalone card in pack 3. Probably not going to make his deck unless he goes blue-black, but I can't imagine him doing that. 4th pick, we saw that Queen's Base Soldier, again aligning him further in black for those vampires. And then he just followed up with more black cards, more vampires, getting that late Queen's Commission as well.
So the thing that we've really not seen for Andrew Baeckstrom thus far is anything in the way of white cards. And he's going to have to hope that either he gets enough in black that he's able to get it all going without needing to be heavily worried about white, or indeed that he sees something a little bit different in the other direction.
Well, the nice thing is, because he's so heavily aligned in black and no other colors, if he opens just any bomb rare in a different color, he can take it and probably end up playing it.
All right, so on to pack 2 here. Now, of course, the opposition for this draft, very potent, so no reason to expect that you're going to get too much coming back there. Unfriendly Fire in there, but we do have a black option in terms of removal in that Dark Nourishment.
Yeah, nothing that he really wants to hate on, save for that Unfriendly Fire. Of course, he could still end up running that if he wanted to.
Slash of Talons, Duskborn Sky Marcher, but it may well be that sticking to black here is a little safer. It's another expensive spell, though. This curve issue Andrew Baeckstrom facing, not likely to go away anytime soon. I
almost like taking the Duskborn Sky Marcher here just to make his curve lower. It's a great vampire to start on, and it just makes your lifelinkers that much more potent, the tokens anyways, the 1/1s.
That is what he goes with. Not necessarily something you'd see first picked in many pack 1s, but in pack 2 definitely has a place. Vampire Zeal, that will be a nice one in any old vampire deck, but also Paladin of the Bloodstained. If you're looking to go wide, certainly achieving that task. Lightning Strike in there as well. Oof, there's a lot of power in these packs, and he's going to have to pass some of it across.
Yeah, this would be an opportunity for Andrew to potentially hate on a card here, as he can still wheel one of those 2 white cards, or maybe even the Pirate in the form of the Deadeye Tormentor we see in the back.
Yeah, sees Fleet Swallow in there, decides to let that one pass. Lightning Strike is the pick here, and because he was so heavily in black in pack 1, it means that there's a little bit of flexibility in terms of what he wants to do in this second pack. I mean, we know that he didn't see very much white in the first pack, so maybe this is Andrew also thinking, I need to move around on my colours a little bit if I'm going to get something going. So 2 spreading rots in this pack, a little unusual. Potentially one of them replacing a foil.
Yeah, a lot of powerful cards in this pack.
Fiery Cannonade, one of those cards that's not necessarily great in his deck, but it may be worth hate drafting because it could be problematic for his entire team.
I think Elaborate Fire Cannon gets a little too much hate. It is slow, but it frequently turns your land drops later in the game to 2 damage. Also, just your filler cards in general can turn into 2 damage.
Yeah, and it also means that Andrew Baeckstrom staying a little bit open in terms of colours here. As he picks up the next pack, has a little look through, sees Vanquish the Weak and immediately shuffles that to the front. Also another Knave there. Already got the first one, maybe looking to double up on that. This Saboteur, another card that he's bringing to the front, just keeping in mind Legion's Judgment. So one way or another, there's either a black or a white removal spell. Between them, they can destroy every creature in the format. It's just going to be a matter of, well, there's one that he can very easily cast and one that he just wants to keep in mind and let his teammates know about.
Yeah, I think his only other consideration there might have been to take the Daring Saboteur as a hate draft, but picking up a removal spell here is pretty nice.
Yeah, Vanquish the Weak gives him something useful to do in the early turns of the game, and potentially sometimes even the later stages. Vampire's Zeal this time round might get the nod, but Sunbird's Invocation, one of those cards that, if left unchecked, can be absolutely monstrous. If you untap with the Sunbird's Invocation in play, suddenly effectively all your spells are like 2 spells, assuming that you hit another copy of a similar or lower cost. Takes the Vampire's Zeal though.
Registration for the Eternal Monarch is now closed.
Perfect for his deck. Excuse me. One of the better combat tricks, of course, in the Vampire deck. Just lets you trade so efficiently.
There we go. There's that call to the feast that Andrew Baeckstrom's deck was really looking for. If he's looking to go wide with Vampires, this one of the most efficient ways of doing so.
Yeah,
3 1/1 white Vampire tokens.
I imagine that has to be the pick. He's not passing too much that he'd want to hate draft. That Rallying Roar he would also like for his deck, but the Call to Feast is just too good here, especially when he already has at least 1 Anointed Deacon.
And potentially kind of a nice sign for Baeckstrom. If it weren't for the fact that also he'd had so much black pass to him, it's just a way of him knowing that he's not facing hate on every side for the entire Vampire clan, even if he's not seen as much white in pack 1 as he might have liked. Slash of Talons here, an option in addition to Queen's Agent.
I think the Slash of Talons is probably the better pick here for Andrew. He already has a lot of expensive creatures and just needs some early interaction. Slash is good at that.
Yeah, picks up the 1-mana white instant. These players gradually sort of settling into lanes as they're in pack 2. It's just a matter of when it's worth it them adjusting just to make sure that things work out. Pillar of Origins would mean that he'd be able to cast his big expensive threats just a little earlier. They are all vampires, so the mana that it makes that can only be spent on one creature type, that not so much a concern.
Yeah, Andrew has some of the more expensive vampires in the format. He doesn't have too many of the low-to-the-ground ones. I think he would love to pick up some Bishop Soldier, especially going into pack 3, but that Pillar might help him.
So a Marauding Looter still working its way around the table. Here, not too much that's going to trouble his deck, so just takes the Looter so that he doesn't need to worry about someone doing naughty things with it against him, or indeed any of his teammates.
And that makes complete sense. Looter is just such a solid pirate. Again, raid triggering anytime you've attacked, not just that one turn.
Be Still My Beating, Heartstopper. There's the Skittering Heartstopper. It's on color, and it gives him a way of interacting in the early game. The 1/2 that he can give Death Touch at just the cost of 1 black mana. Takes a look at 4. There's one of them that he can easily cast, and that is the one he takes. There's nothing too powerful at these later stages in this second pack. So just gradually building up a game plan. And Andrew has been able to draft a deck here that should be able to lean on the power of his early picks quite well.
Yeah, if he ends up running that Desperate Castaways and maybe even that Pillar, at least that's one artifact to go along with his deck. Good place overall, though. I think he has plenty of playables going into the pack 3. Oh, wow, and he did wheel that Rallying Roar. If he picks up some more token producers, we know he has at least 1 Queen's Commission and 1 Call to the Feast. That could do some work, but it looks like he's going to go for the enchantment removal instead.
Yeah, it takes Demystify. There are certainly some problematic enchantments in the format, and I guess that this is out against them. I think Rallying Roar would have been pretty potent, though. Normally, there's a Demystify floating around somewhere in the draft that you can take if you really need to, but looks like Andrew prioritizing getting one in his pile sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I think that might have been the only maybe misstep that he's taken in this draft, but like you mentioned, Demystify, finding lots of targets, plenty of people playing enchantments, although I think he would have preferred to have that Rallying Roar in the long run, as it is uncommon, and he's unlikely to see it in the next pack, or less likely at any rate. Yeah, good place overall, though. Second pack got him that Duskborn Skymarcher we saw the first pick. He hated on that Lightning Strike pick 2, Elaborate Fire Cannon, maybe not the pick that a lot of people would have considered, but I think still a decent pickup. Vampire Zeal, Vanquish the Weak, Call to the Feast, I think, was the most important pickup for him. But yeah, overall, not too bad. He's going to have a lot of playables going into pack 3.
And there's every reason to suspect in pack 3 that he's going to see lots of black cards and potentially not much in the way of white cards. Not necessarily a problem, more of a feature of where he's at in this draft. If he can just make sure that his early game is shored up. Obviously, he would love to pick up another powerful top-end finisher, but to be perfectly honest, the way that he's going to lose this game is more likely getting run over in these early turns.
We get an extra look at cards he's taken so far. Yeah, again, lots of playables. That Skymarcher might be a little bit awkward to cast in the early game, as he is so much heavier black than white. But even late game, being able to pump up one of your vampires and pushing it through extra damage in the combat is quite good.
All right, so we're just shaping up towards this third pack. Any particular cards that you think that Baeckstrom will be especially hoping to see in this third pack?
Yeah, just the low drops. Bishop Soldier, I think, is the premium one. Adanto Vanguard would be another great 2-drop. I would not be surprised if he ends up taking some Queens-based soldiers a little bit higher just because he wants to lower his curve.
Well, we'll get a chance to find out. Of course, one thing that he may simply end up doing is, if there's a powerful card for someone else's deck, just removing that from the draft if he absolutely has to. There are some things that just have a big signal on their forehead saying do not pass, especially in this format where you know if you pass a powerful card, there's a good chance that your team might end up on the losing side of it.
Absolutely. I think we might have caught a glimpse there on that flip card from Andrew here.
Yep, Huatli, Warrior Poet. And oh, this is a tough old pack because there's going to be a lot of powerful cards here. Contract Killing, a premium removal spell. Walk the Plank, also a premium removal spell. Then there's Huatli, Warrior Poet. Then I believe that we also have a great vampire in the mix there in Glorifier of Dusk. So this is a real tester because basically the Huatli is going to be kind of fiddly for him to splash if he really wants it. But at the same time, the opportunity cost of him taking it is high because there are so many great cards that would make his deck.
Yeah, I almost like taking the Huatli here because so many good black and white cards are going around. He might be able to wheel one if he takes the Planeswalker.
All right, so Andrew Baeckstrom is going to have the conversation with his team where he says, did you guys see Huatli? Because if not, I mean, basically he will be mapping out all of the cards in that pack that were sort of top level cards and saying, which ones made it how far, so that we can try and figure out who has the really potent cards in that pack. It was a pack just full of juice.
Wow.
Waker of the Wilds here in the pack, and this might be another hate draft for Andrew Baeckstrom. Because to be honest, Anointed Deacon, it's good, but it's not great. And Walker of the Wilds, one of those cards that if you get to the mid to late game and the green deck has a lot of mana, it's suddenly just turning all of its creatures into pretty potent threats.
Well, I mean, if he took the Walk the Plank and passed Huatli in the previous pack, he might do the same thing and take the Anointed Deacon here and pass the Waker of the Wilds. Again, Waker of the Wilds, pretty unbeatable, though.
Yeah, does take that one, does not want to have to let his team down too much.
I mean, I like that pick. I also liked taking the Huatli, but I can understand taking the Walk the Planky as he doesn't have too much removal yet.
Vampire Zeal and Skyblade to consider here. There's been a few Fire Cannon Blasts in these packs as well. If someone's in red, then they might be thinking about them, though to be perfectly honest, the power level of this third pack in general has just been super duper high. Vampire Zeal getting shuffled to the front here early on.
Yeah, a few good options here. I can understand taking the trick, but I think Andrew's just going to want the Skyblade as he needs more low drops.
Yeah, and the Skyblade, a really good low drop for him, not just because it flies, but also a 1-3, kind of where he wants to be, because it means that if opposing creatures are 2-2s, 2-1s, and so on, he has a blocker that will get him to the mid and indeed late game. All right, the power level is there. Legion Conquistador is something he has to the front initially. Admiral Beckett, complicated on the mana, and when you see it in this late in the draft, it could get tricky to cast. Still kind of potent, though. Raider's Wake, though, the card that he's got at the front. How do we feel about that card, Henji? I've not actually had much chance to play it just yet.
It's very hit or miss. I think it's sideboard dependent. I think if you're able to go low to the ground, it's generally pretty good, as you can curve out maybe even a 2 or 3 drop into the Raider's Wake. Andrew's deck is a little more expensive, though. He only has a few 2 drops and even fewer 3s, or rather, few 3 drops, fewer 2s. So it's going to be hard for him to curve a creature into Raider's Wake and use it to good effect.
Anointed Deacon getting shuffled around here alongside a Queen's Agent.
Oh, Anointed Deacon's the perfect card for Andrew. Again, he has not as many low drops as he wants, but Deacon is just the premium common for the Vampire deck. It allows your 1/1 lifelinkers to attack in as 3/1s. It allows his Skyblade of the Legion to turn into a 3/3 from a 1/3. It just pushes so much damage in the Vampire deck.
I think that his second copy of that one. So potentially he can turn those 1/1s into 5/1s and just have game-ending threats all over the place. Another option, another Anointed Deacon. Some Castaways in this pack also. Desperate Castaways if he wants to have a lower cost pick. Looks like he's going with another Anointed Deacon, though.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's not really anything in this pack that he would hate on, and Deacon will make its way into his deck. Again, he's really aching for some 2s and 3s, though. I don't think he's seen a single Bishop Soldier.
Yeah, that kind of a tough one for him, but at this point, unlikely he's going to. These packs just working their way through now. Hierophant's Chalice is an option if he just wants to get to the mid and late game a bit faster, but equally he could take something like that Water Trap Weaver and just make it so that the person who is in blue isn't getting quite as much going on.
Yeah, it looks like he's probably going to take the Water Trap Weaver here. Probably not going to make his deck, but then again, none of those other cards are going to either.
Yeah, a few good blue cards left in there. Still a few nice tricks available for whoever the blue drafter at the table is, and we can see here still more good blue cards in these packs, but yet another Anointed Deacon. Pirate's Cutlass also in there, and the Cutlass one that I've found to be very flexible and versatile and powerful. More Deacons, his 5-drop getting very busy at this point. I'd have been tempted to just get a Cutlass out of this draft and potentially use it to suit up my guys.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. That's his 4th Anointed Deacon, I believe, and the Cutlass acts as a pseudo Deacon, that he can just move around at will.
Vampire Zeal still in the pack, so that seems likely to be what Baeckstrom going with here. The Skittering Heartstopper is another low drop. Elects for the Zeal, though. A foil Zeal at that. We're in the very final stages of this here. Gets an option on either a Blight Keeper or Hierophant's Chalice. Kind of like the Blight Keeper there, just another low to the ground drop just to get to the mid to / late game. It's possible he could get up to 8 mana, and at that point, obviously, very exciting. But in the meantime, a 1/1 that just gets stuck in. Queen's Agent still in the pack, and he does take it. So blue looking to be the color that was, if anything, a little underdrafted at this 6-man table. We'll find out, of course, soon enough how everyone did choose to move around. Commune with Dinosaurs or Deep-Root Waters takes the Commune. I think that one, the slightly more powerful pick for someone, and Andrew Baeckstrom choosing to deny that to anyone left in this draft. Costly Plunder, and that pretty much rounding it out for Andrew Baeckstrom. All right, Kenji, how do we feel that draft went all told for Baeckstrom as we see he picks up a Spreading Rot at the end there?
It started off so well. He was cutting off the black vampires so hard. I'm taking a look at his draft picks here, but he just didn't end up with the white cards he wanted. He has like 1 or 2 good white cards for his vampire deck, the Duskborn, Sky Marcher, and maybe the Call to the Feast. He didn't pick up any of the important white removal spells. We saw him pass on Ixalan's Binding as well as that Pious Interdiction that was all in one pack. And so he has a lot of expensive vampires. I think 4 Anointed Deacons. He's got that Sanctum Seeker, of course, very, very good, but at 4 mana, he's not doing anything in the early game save for maybe 1 Skyblade. Ruthless Knave, Queensbay Soldier, just filler cards until he gets to his top end.